everyone, my name is Tyler Reed, and I'm going to be discussing the business ethics dilemma brought forward by the Valeant Pharmaceuticals, which began in the late 2000s and ended in 2016, which was the exact reign of Michael Pearson here on the screen as the CEO. He was let go after the ethical dilemma was brought forward. I found this to be a very interesting topic because there was many moving parts and many different ethical issues throughout the scandal, and some are listed here. It was cost cutting, which was cutting all costs necessary basically to create these drugs, if it was laying off employees or just cutting corners on bills or whatever. There's price gouging, which was raising the prices of these drugs through the roof, which customers needed to survive in many cases, and it also increased their insurance and create a tough time getting jobs if you needed such high insurance. And through changing and manipulating the financial statements. More specifically, the most famous one would be through Philidor, which was a subsidiary of a subsidiary for Valeant, which they could manipulate and hide very well in their financial statements. This is one of the biggest cases in the pharmaceutical world, as Mr. Pearson claimed to be revolutionizing the pharmaceutical industry, which later turned out to be, just a couple of years ago, considered as the Enron type case of the pharmaceutical industry. So the first biggest ethical dilemma is that the pricing was ethical. His first move was to drop all research and development prices. So the industry norm was 18% revenues spent on research and development for finding new drugs, finding cures, anything like that, which is huge in the pharmaceutical industry. And he dropped that to 3% as part of his moves. He then raised the price up of his drugs about 400% in some cases. One example is the drug for the Wilson's disease, it's called, which is, if you don't have drugs, which is actually deadly. He took that one and made it went from $500 per month to have that medication to about $24,000, which is a little under 400% increase. And this increases insurance costs for citizens. If they don't have a job right now, it's hard to find a job with an insurance package because the insurance would be through the roof, or it creates a reason that the customers and patients will feel like they might be laid off because their insurance is increasing so highly. And there's nothing really they could do because Valeant came forward one time and said, we can either stop making the drugs or we can sell them for this price. So their hands were tied really because they needed the drugs, but they couldn't afford it in many cases. And another way to get his stocks up and to create the low cost was something called roll-ups, which he was very famous for. And that's how he described himself as revolutionizing the industry. Roll-ups were basically acquiring as many companies as you can in the industry to try to create a profit and hope that you're going to create a profit. So throughout his reign, he acquired over 200 subsidiaries. He bought them out for billions and billions and billions. There was one of the most famous ones called Allergen, which he actually didn't end up getting, but he spent time with insider trading, which he did with many of his places, legal insider trading, basically, to try to buy out their competition or buy out their already developed drugs. So that's how he got his research and development so far down, is he'd buy out places that already had drugs created and that were working, and then he'd raise them through the roof through his price increase. As you can see, from 2008, it says, to 2015-ish, his stock price was increasing by billions, and people were making billions off of them. People turned a blind eye to this or didn't even want to know why, almost like the many cases we've cited in the class, just because they're making such increased profits. Almost like the Ponzi scheme you learned about. But then you can see in 2016 it dropped off his stocks, which we'll get to in a second. But this is just the pricing ethics, which his stakeholders here would be investors, but they'd also be the customers of the pharmaceutical drugs. They're not getting the drugs anymore. It'd be the government. They need to figure out why this is happening, why they can't get patients. It'd be the insurance companies. Why is their insurance so high? Employers employing these people with such high insurance. So there's many stakeholders here that aren't really being thought of and brought forward by Valeant. They're kind of just the only stakeholder they're worried about is their shareholder in this case, and their own profits, which is an ethical dilemma for sure. The financials ethical, that is the second piece of this pie. As I said before, for Philidor, they had a very big famous case for this. Philidor was actually, if you looked at their financials, they were not allowed to sell pharmaceutical drugs, but they were a mail order company. So they would deliver the drug to your door. So Philidor was doing was they weren't actually selling pharmaceuticals. They were selling creams, like vitamin C creams, vitamin A creams, and delivering them to your door. But they were a subsidiary of KGA. And so no one really saw Philidor. No one knew what Philidor really was. And KGA was a subsidiary of Valeant. So no one knew Valeant owned Philidor. And Philidor was basically raising like a cream. For one example, was the price of cream for a foot was up to $1,000, and the customer wasn't paying for it; the insurance was paying for it. So it'd be a continuing cycle. And then once the insurance company would start to catch on to something, they'd create a new name or a new pharmacy, and then run it through that. And they keep manipulating these financial statements and keep manipulating insurance companies and customers. So they're making such high profits on such low costs. So that was, they manipulated their financials in many ways. Another one was the sales versus the price. They manipulated the sales volume compared to price. And in the video I watched, this case there, someone asked him about it, and he basically said he gained trust in people. The guy trusted him when he said, "Don't worry about my financials, worry about what I'm doing because I'm revolutionizing this industry. So don't worry about financials, worry about what the future is." So the sales volume wouldn't go up at all, but the prices and revenues would skyrocket. But he'd manipulate that to create that investors thought that he was selling more, basically. The question and the biggest concern for many people was if this is legal. He was doing legal insider trading. He was manipulating his financials in many ways that were legal. A lot of this was legal, some of it wasn't, but a lot of this was legal, which creates a huge concern and ethical concern for customers and the companies and other pharmaceutical companies in competition. As I mentioned, stakeholders, every single stakeholder possible is affected by this, and the only one that's really benefited is the shareholders during this time. So that's basically it for the business ethics of this. In 2016, this person right here, her name was Cordier, and her last name is Cordier, and she was basically a whistleblower, but no one was listening to her. She was mentioning this to SEC, to the boards, to the government. No one was listening to her. And it wasn't until a different pharmaceutical company got caught. They were selling Damaprin, which is medicine for cancer and for AIDS, and they were caught price gouging and raising these prices. And that's kind of when everything started to fall apart for Valeant, because they were then brought forward to the news. Well, aren't they price gouging as well? And they were. And right when they brought to the news, their stock fell off completely. A couple of the whistleblowers, like Quadir and others, quickly got popularity and were being listened to. And that's when they found Philidor. That's when they found exactly what they were doing, the roll-ups. And they found that this wasn't actually all legit, and that there was debt from the roll-ups, and that there was price gouging, and customers weren't getting what they needed for pharmaceuticals. It was actually a discussion in the 2016 election debates. Hillary Clinton brought up the other pharmaceutical company that was caught price gouging, but which eventually led to prices in drugs and how we can control this and how we can't get them to say, we'll stop making the drugs if we can't sell them at this price, kind of thing. As I mentioned, this was considered the Enron, basically, of the pharmaceutical world, and was a huge ethical dilemma. Going forward for them, I would highly suggest benefiting their stakeholders more now. If they want to, they were bought out by another pharmaceutical company, but for their own brand name, maybe right now with this coronavirus going on, they could become, they could do research and give affordable health care right now, affordable drugs, affordable anything really for the coronavirus. They could be support to get their stakeholders back into and be trusted again, really. Mr. Pearson stepped down in 2016, and actually he had some health concerns during 2016, which led to more concerns and issues with the stock as well, which really plummeted. One of his biggest investors ended up taking over, and I think he was the one who sold it to the other pharmaceutical company.